Um, I'll start with three lines from a poem that you probably all know and are more than familiar with. Um, Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Um, this is from The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, which is probably the most famous and most quoted American poem in the history of American poems. And it is tacked up in schoolrooms and on refrigerators across the country for inspiration. And in addition to being the most read and most quoted poem, I've been aware of this poem my entire life, I think. It is also the most misread poem in the history of American poetry. And in addition to that, it's a 20-line poem. And what I've always felt, the gap between how people read it and what the poem really says also makes it one of the most interesting psychology experiments I've ever encountered. And to say a few things about that, so what is the poem viewed as? And I'm deliberately not reading the poem because I know that I want people to rely on their memory for this, like what they take away from it, remember for it. But it is the poem of trailblazers that, dadgummit, I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. The decisions I've made are blazing trails for everyone, and I am a nonconformist, and if you were as brave as me, you could change the world too. That's really not a bad message at all. Unfortunately, it is not at all what the poem says. And the reason that we focus on that is because those are the last lines of the poem, line 20, and that has made all the difference. So what does the poem really say? It says the exact opposite. That it's about the deceit that and really the lies that we tell through hindsight over time, that we look back and attribute to things significance that they didn't really have in the moment in which they occurred. And so, although line 20 is the most important line of the poem, or the most memorable line, I should say, the most important and most forgotten line of the poem is halfway through line 10. So halfway in the end, or the important part, line 10 is, as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And so halfway through this short poem, the two paths are the same, but a mere 10 lines later, it's, man, I took the road less traveled by, and this is amazing, right? And so something happens between line 10 and line 20 that makes this, for me, a fascinating psychology experiment. That how does your mind go from recognizing that two things are the same halfway through something, but by the end, they're different somehow? What happens? How can we forget so quickly? Like in the span of 10 lines, how can your mind change? First, I'd say that Robert Frost was a very mean-spirited and tricky man, but that is a whole nother story to tell. So how do we forget? It's because Robert Frost understood that we value ends over means. We value the most recent over the thing that is in the past, and we value destinations much more than we value journeys. No matter what our posters say and inspirational sayings say up on the walls in our offices. And what makes Frost so brilliant is that he knew that we would value line 20 over line 10, just like we do in these experiences. And what we really value is certainty, that we could look at a choice that we made, the cause, and say, hey, that has made all the difference. I am super amazing because of this choice, which is the effect. And we really love that certainty. And so I used to read the poem that way, that it was this inspirational thing. And boy, I was going to go out and be a nonconformist every single day. But I would encourage everybody taking this in to go back and to read this poem and engage with its critique of hindsight. And I would encourage you to embrace the uncertainty that it presents, that there's a beauty and a humanity and a humility in uncertainty that I don't think we need to shy away from in any way. And I would reflect on, and I do this all the time in reading this poem, on the choices that I've made in my own life. When I look back at choices that I've made, that can I get to a point where I can simply accept that, I don't know if things would have turned out differently or been better. And you know what? In the end, that's okay. It's okay for me not to know. So go back and read The Road Not Taken and pay attention to line 10 more than line 20 for once. Thanks for listening.